So let's talk about how to price your online course so that you can have the best chance of one, being valuable so that when people enter your course, they think, oh my gosh, this is so worth the money, and they're happy and they're pleased, but also so that you set yourself up for success so that you can actually be earning good money. Because if you've never priced a course before, or if you are worried about the price that you've come up with your course, that's completely understandable. It's definitely a process that's made a lot easier with a little bit of experience. And by the way, if we haven't met before, my name is Sarah Turner and I have over 11 years of experience in pricing digital products, first as a copywriter and then in my own programs. I'm an 8-figure course creator and I have helped many people set up their own digital products and online courses. And so I know a thing or two about pricing an online course. And if you're just finding this video, it's actually part of a series that I've put together. I'll go ahead and link to the videos below in case you want more context. But really, I want to dive right on in because this is a really interesting topic and I have some thoughts after years of helping so many people go through this process that are a little different from what you might find online. So let's dig in. So first things first, your success in the online course space is going to be at the intersection of what lights you up and you have experience in, as well as how you can successfully help other people with your program. And there is not a one-size-fits-all model. Something I want to make sure that we are really clear about, because I firmly believe this after helping thousands of people through this process, is that the real clarity of this process in all aspects, but also in pricing your course, actually comes through taking action. If you get stuck in the ideation part of this process, you will stay stuck. Because when you put something out into the real world, that's when you actually get feedback. And that's how you get to take the information that you receive and iterate your program so that you can have the best chance of success. So everything I'm going to give you are my best ideas, tips, and tricks for pricing your online course. But at the end of the day, it's not until you actually price it and put it out into the world that you will get good feedback so that you can actually come up with a solid number. So the first thing you have to take into consideration when you are pricing your online course is you need to balance your own personal desires for why you're doing this, what you want this to look like, your time and financial commitments, with your ICA or your ideal customer avatar's wants and needs. Now, it's really interesting. Sometimes people think they want or they need something that they don't actually need in order to be successful. For example, almost every single person will think that they will thrive better if they have one-on-one individual time with you, the course creator. I have found that to not be true. But that's because people tend to really underestimate the value of a path, which would be the course, and of group coaching, if that's an element you decide you want to include. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the different ways of structuring your program in a little bit, but I want you to know that anytime somebody comes to you with a desire for what they want your program to look like, you have to take it in with a big grain of salt. You have to make sure that you are balancing it. And one of the things I always like to recommend to my students, to people who are building online courses, is to make sure that you're asking yourself, what is the real need here? Because more often than not, you can meet that need in a way that is still respecting your own boundaries and what you want to do with your own program. Because the fastest way to burn yourself out and to not really help as many people as possible and to create a program that is not lucrative or financially successful is to offer an incredible amount of one-on-one time. Now, that might be the place you want to start out, especially if you're doing a beta test, because that's how you're going to actually learn and get feedback the fastest in order to create course materials that really meets the needs of the people going through your program. But eventually, you're probably going to want to take the things that are repeatable, turn them into lessons, and have people go through those on your own. This will also elevate any of the group coaching calls you decide to have, or any live Q&As if you decide to have those, or if you have any one-on-one time, you will elevate the conversation if you give them materials that actually get them to a better place of understanding. Because if you just do a lot of one-on-one stuff, what you will quickly learn is that you're repeating yourself over and over and over again to many different people. And again, that's one of the fastest ways to burn out. It's one of the fastest ways to eat away at profitability. And all of those things are necessary in order to have a fully functioning and thriving online education business. things. When you are thinking about pricing your program, it's important to remember that you're going to want to price based in value. And what I mean by that is you're going to be pricing based in the size of the problem that you solve. Now, people often make the mistake of thinking that in order to have a higher priced product, you need to have an ROI or a return on your investment, meaning it's something that actually helps people make money. That is not true. You can absolutely have a program that helps people overcome an emotional benefit or an emotional pain point. And that emotional ROI is really valuable. But one thing's for sure, your program promises a transformation. And we went over that in the previous video. So if you haven't seen that, you might want that for a little context. But so that we're all on the same page, I want to make sure that you have a program and you're very clear on what the transformation is. What is the solution that you are solving for the person coming through your program, and how big is that problem that you're solving? Or maybe you have a DIY course, or maybe it's something that's helping you organize your pantry, showing you what things to buy, tips and tricks for making it really functional with maybe having a bunch of kids. That's really helpful, but it'll probably be valued a little bit less than something that is actually going to help them get a new career or overcome a big emotional problem like going through a divorce or something like that. Now, another common mistake people make when they are pricing their course is they think maybe this course, because it's only an hour-long video, or the task itself is very short, they will undervalue their program. But for example, if you teach somebody how to write their resume and maybe you have some insider information because maybe you were in recruiting, I don't know, I'm just kind of coming up with some ideas here. But you teach people how to write their resume so that they can get the job of their dreams. Even if the program is really short, the potential outcome is incredible. Right? So it doesn't matter if it's an hour-long lesson and a 30-minute review with you. If it's helping them, again, get that dream job that they've been wanting and not knowing how to stand out in the crowd because maybe it's very competitive, then that value is much higher than the actual duration of the course. That is something I want you to keep in mind, is you would want to price and what is the outcome. Obviously, you will need social proof in order to raise the price of your course, but it is something that I want you to keep in mind. What is the value of the transformation you are providing with your program? And that actually brings me to my next point, which is when you don't have a lot of social proof, you will likely have to price your program at a lower price point. And as you increase the amount of social proof that you have, that you actually deliver on the process, you increase the value and you are able to raise your rates. Now, another big context or a big picture thing that I want you to keep in mind is how it is much easier to increase the price of something than it is to decrease the price of something. Because obviously, if you bring people in at a higher price point and then you decrease the price, those people are going to be pretty upset. So you can incrementally increase the price of your program as you prove its value to other people and maybe even to yourself. Because of this, people will often have what's called a value ladder, which is a term that was coined by Russell Brunson. He's the creator of ClickFunnels. But a value ladder is basically the very simple concept of having a few offerings that start at a lower price point and increase to a higher price point. Now, you may not have many different offerings, and that's okay. In fact, one of the things that I think I've done really well in my own business and in helping other people is by not complicating things and having too many offerings. But understanding the idea of a value ladder is really helpful because what you'll notice is generally as the price point increases, the amount of time investment by the course creator also increases. Because for example, if you were to sell a course for $47 and have 3 one-on-one sessions, you're going to burn yourself out and quite frankly, probably not be able to pay your bills. And another thing to keep in mind is that generally the price points are following a customer journey. So from the earlier price points or the lower price points, you're going to have somebody who's maybe not as familiar with you, who's getting to know you. You're solving a smaller problem or you're helping them with a smaller desire. And then as you increase in value on your value ladder, you're getting to a place where you have more time commitment on your part and you're solving bigger problems and having bigger transformations. And the point of this value ladder is that you are actually helping people along the customer journey, solving bigger problems, but you're also creating customer loyalty and you're increasing the likelihood of just overall business success. And customer loyalty is something that's really important to keep in mind because there's a few interesting stats I want to share with you. So, acquiring a new customer is 5 times more expensive than selling to an existing customer. In fact, the success rate of selling a product or service to an existing customer is 60 to 70%, but price point will play a factor in that. Whereas selling to a new customer is around 1 to 20%. You're going to have a much lower conversion rate with new people. Additionally, loyal customers are 5 times more likely to repurchase from you, 4 times more likely to forgive you when you make a mistake, which is going to happen, and 4 times more likely to refer you to other people, and 7 times more likely to try a new offering. This is also why you want to always be building a business with the utmost integrity because your reputation will continue to grow and flourish. So what can these offerings look like? This could be an entry-level offering. It could be free or paid, but maybe it's a giveaway, a checklist, a 1-hour webinar, a masterclass, something like that. Then you'll generally have your core offerings like an online course, maybe a group coaching package, and then you'll move up to your premium offerings, which could be a mastermind or one-on-one coaching, something that's higher level. And again, I just want to say you don't have to have all of these things. It's just important to understand where your program falls in the context of the customer journey. Because even if you don't have an entry-level offering at a lower price point, say $47, $97, $27, those resources will likely still want to be created, and they could be lead magnets or freebies to entice people to join your email list so that you then can present to them the actual core offer that you have. And then of course you can have upsells and cross sells, but I'm going to not really dig into those today for just the sake of keeping things simple because you don't really have to have those. Again, the main reason I'm even talking about this is because it's important to think about the customer journey that your potential customers will go on and thinking about where your program falls in that customer journey because it's going to inform what you price it at. It's also going to inform the entire structure of your funnel. And also, this is a really important concept to keep in mind because it's relationship building. You're going deeper as you go on with your different offers. But again, I want you to know it's absolutely okay to have one core offering, and it can be a premium product, it could be a lower price point. So for example, I have 2 programs. I have one that teaches people how to become a copywriter. It takes them from not knowing what copywriting is to having everything they need to be a full-blown freelance copywriter to thrive. And my students have gone on to work for massive, massive names in the industry, like the biggest of the biggest. So that started out when it was just a course. There was no live component to it, and it was $2,000 at that point. But as I increased the live elements so that I could help more people, people who needed extra support, who needed more feedback, I added a ton of live coaching, 2-hour calls a week, weekly live Q&A with me, an editing team to give them direct editing feedback to their work. So much was added to that program. And obviously the expenses of the business increased dramatically. And when I did that, I had to raise the price of the course, and it ended up being $6,800. So that's an example of increasing the price of the course as you increase the value. Now, another thing that's important to keep in mind is that the time frame matters. If you are going to be having a program that takes somebody realistically a year to go through, you're going to need to increase the price point because you're going to have a year's worth of support you have to provide. Most course creators limit the amount of support that they provide, and you should too, quite frankly. In fact, I'll say one of the biggest mistakes that I made as a course creator for my own program was providing unlimited support for my students. I ultimately had to cap the live elements at a year, which quite frankly was too long. And what it did was it put an incredible amount of strain on the expenses for the business. So keep that in mind. You are going to have associated costs with whatever it is that you are delivering to your students, and you want to make sure that you take that into account when you are pricing your program. Now, I generally recommend that people go for a premium price product. There's differences in opinions on what that means. To me, that means something that is at least $500 or more. Quite frankly, if you can create a program that is $1,000 or more, that's better. And the reason for that is because you need to have healthy profit margins. And it is going to cost you money to keep this thing running. You have tech. You probably will have staff. If you want to bring on any other coaches, your time. people make the mistake of underestimating how much it takes to actually run and keep an online course running and running well, because there's a lot of conversation about how it's a passive way of making money. Now, it can be passive, and the way that you would make it passive is if it was an online course only with 0 live elements, which is okay to do, but I've found there is a lot of value in the live elements, and we'll dig into that when I go over the pros and cons of the different ways that you can structure your online course. But before we do that, I just want to reiterate one more time, it is really important to start out with a price point that is as inexpensive as it can be while still covering your bills, so that you can get people into the program, really build up that social proof, and be able to raise your rates later on. Now, I will say that most people who end up working with me are heart-centered, really empathetic, caring people, and the tendency that they have is to underestimate the value of their program and to charge too little. And then what happens is they realize that, it is pretty much the same cost to acquire, a lead into your funnel, no matter what the price point of your program is. So for example, let's say you have a $100 program, or let's say you have a $1,000 program. Let's talk about the two different people. Let's actually say that it's two different people, right? One person has a $100 program, one person has a $1,000 program. To get people to pay attention, to join your email list, to go through the sales email sequence, to consider signing up for that program is going to generally be about the same amount of effort. And that's, again, why I really encourage you to think about what can you do to make your program premiumly priced. Now, I want to make sure that there's a caveat to that. Generally, you will have higher conversions with a lower priced item, and that's just because it's easier for somebody to part with $100 than it is for somebody to part with $1,000. You pause and you think a little bit harder about that $1,000 purchase, right? But to get those people, those initial eyeballs on your email list or whatever top of funnel strategy you're using, YouTube organic, Instagram Reels, whatever it is, it generally takes about the same amount of effort. So it really is in your best interest to think, how can I deliver a premium product? And there's a lot of ways you can do that. But first, let's talk about the different ways you can structure an online program. So generally, this is what we see in the online education space. One-on-one programs, group programs, digital products. So when I say digital products, I generally separate it from online courses. And what I mean, it could be ebooks, video tutorials, digital art, stock photography, sound and music effects, graphic design templates, templates for specific tools like Trello or Dubsado, checklists, guides, things like that. Whereas online courses are typically going to include lessons, quizzes, assignments, assessments, and things like that, and can generally tackle a bigger transformation. Now, we've also got communities, which are great for membership sites around shared interests or goals. And then, of course, you've got hybrids. So generally, people typically have a hybrid where they pick these different elements and package them together. And these are all really important to consider when you are pricing your program, again, because you want to keep in mind your time commitment. So in the first video of this series, I dug into this graph that you'll see here. And this is the time versus profitability potential of these different types of programs. So on the y-axis, you'll see your time commitment from low to high. And then on the x-axis, you'll see the profitability potential from low to high. So in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see one-on-one, remembering that it's a high time commitment. And because time is a finite resource, it has a low profitability potential. Moving along the profitability potential, you have group, just because you are freeing up some of your time by bundling people together. I put digital products on the low time commitment and on the middle of the profitability potential. Digital products could really fall in different areas of the profitability potential because, keeping in mind, if you already have a big audience, for example, you actually have a really high profitability potential for a digital product because you have volume working with you. So that one's a little bit more nuanced, but I had to place it somewhere, and this is where I placed it. I put it on the lower of the time commitment, below courses, again, because I'm kind of separating it out, because in my mind, I'm separating these digital products from online courses to be things that are generally going to be lower value, not be so beefy, and quite frankly, they generally take a little bit less time. But again, a lot of nuance packed in here. Then you'll see communities and courses. Communities have a little bit more of a time commitment, especially when you're first creating them because you're setting that community culture. However, you can generally set communities to be self-regulating, which is pretty amazing. And they have a high impact because they feel good. People really love communities. Now, courses, a little bit less of a time commitment than communities, more generally than a digital product, and a pretty high profitability potential. Then we've got our high ticket courses and programs. Now, that's anything that's $3,000 and above. Generally, high ticket delivers on a pretty impactful transformation, as well as has some live elements, usually coaches or accountability or something built in to where they can get real individualized feedback. Now, high ticket has a high time commitment, but a real profitability potential. So just so you know, this is what we're working with. Now, I want to talk to you about the pros and cons of each of these structures because, again, this is something that you want to keep in mind not only when you're structuring your offer, but when you are pricing your offer. So some of the pros of one-on-one programs include they're highly personalized, they cultivate a deeper connection, you get more immediate feedback, which is super powerful because you can integrate it into your program. And there's also higher confidentiality, which is really important for anybody who has, sensitive subject matter with their program. You'll also have a lower tech commitment and you'll be able to get it up and running more quickly because generally it can just be a schedule and some Zoom calls, right? This is also something that you'll probably want to consider when you're running a beta test or when you're testing an offer is having more one-on-one elements. And then the cons are that they're very time intensive. It requires you to be there with them more. It also puts a natural limit on profitability because time is finite. And then that means you'll have limited scalability and it can be more expensive for clients because you have to account for the time inputs that you're putting into your program. Next, we've got group programs. Now, some of the pros include that they are more cost effective generally. They can also be more accessible to a broader audience because you can bring that price point down a little bit. There's also the benefit of having peer support, which is really powerful and often underestimated by program creators. There's also increased efficiency because you can work with multiple clients as once and they'll learn from each other. There's also a positive impact on skill transfer, again, because they're supporting each other, but also they'll often take your teachings and they'll apply it to their own personal circumstances and other people can learn from that. It's really amazing. I'm a big believer in group learning. And also group programs can be relatively low tech. You could host them on Zoom, for example. You wouldn't necessarily need a full build out of a course in a platform like Kajabi, for example. This also makes them faster to get up and running. Now, some of the cons include that it can be and feel less personalized. It also can reduce the privacy, which is a really important consideration if you have a sensitive topic. Now, let's talk about digital products. And again, remembering I'm kind of separating these out from online courses specifically. So digital products, some of the pros includes that they are super scalable, especially if you are not having any live components. It's going to be far less time intensive and you will be able to create passive income or more passive income. Then it's going to be more affordable generally because of the lower time inputs. You can typically bring the cost of the digital product down. Then you've got global reach or just reach in general because digital products can be put into the hands of practically anyone. Now let's talk about some of the cons of digital products, which can include limited interaction, which brings down the perceived value for a lot of people. Also, self-motivation is typically required with digital products that have no live elements, meaning you're relying on the people who are going through that digital product to show up and do the actual work, which can be hard when there's nothing really holding them accountable. It could also be considered a little bit more of a competitive market just because there's a lot of digital products online, although that can often be handled with good marketing. Now, digital products does require a little bit more tech typically than one-on-one coaching and group coaching because you have to actually build it out. It has to have a place to live. You need a payment processor and things like that. So now let's talk about online courses. Some of the pros include that there's more structured learning, making it suitable for teaching specific skills or knowledge. It also allows for diverse content where you can have different kinds of elements like quizzes, assessments, things that can help enhance learning. Another pro is that it's self-paced, meaning people can participate at their own time, which is really helpful for accommodating busy schedules. Some of the cons of online courses include that there's limited personalization. Another con is there tends to be a lower completion rate with online courses if there isn't some sort of live element, because live elements really help with motivation and accountability. Online courses with no live elements can have lower engagement. They can also have a slower development or success timeline. And another con is that it generally involves more tech because you're usually going to need to host it on a platform that people can access, again, like Kajabi, Teachable, whatever. All right, let's dig into communities. Some of the pros of communities include that people are able to get peer support. This is actually something that I see course creators underestimate over and over again. Peer support is powerful, and you can cultivate good peer support by encouraging the people who are answering questions well within your community and having a community leader who can set the tone and expectations for the community. Also, in communities, people get to learn through interaction. It makes for a much more enjoyable experience. Another pro is the ongoing engagement. Engagement encourages people to stay motivated and to stick with it, which is really powerful because you have people actually completing your program. Another great thing about communities, they're pretty scalable because as long as you have good moderators, really big communities can be actually very powerful. Another pro about communities is they feel really good. I can't tell you the number of times that people who have been through my programs always say that the price of the program is justified by the community alone. And that's because it's the feel-good part of a program. So I typically recommend that people always include a community. And usually the hesitation is that it's going to be a ton of time. But actually, if you set good expectations and cultivate a really good community culture, it can be a pretty self-regulated system. You might want to eventually hire a community leader, but that might not be necessary even. You'll also learn so much by engaging with your community, which will help you create resources and add to your online program so that you are not always answering the same questions, for example, and then you'll be able to really meet your students where they're at. The cons include moderation challenges, for sure. That's definitely something you'll have to take into consideration. Also, participation levels are something that can vary and be really difficult to cultivate, especially in the beginning when you have a low volume of people. Another con of communities can be privacy issues. If you have a sensitive subject, a lot of people might not want to talk about that within the community. And then finally, another potential con can be the tech involved. But communities can be as simple as a free Facebook community that's just a part of your program, or it can be hosted on a platform like Circle, for example. And then of course there's hybrids. And what I mean by that is just choosing different elements from the list that I just went over with you to create your own program. All right, all of that was super important context to have in order to figure out how you should price your program and how you should structure it. This process of creating a program is really about untying your earning potential from your time and having a bigger impact by creating something that can be put into the hands of more people. You're working really hard to be at a place where you can set your own hours, where you can have absolute freedom so that you can do what you want to do more of in this life. And you absolutely should give yourself permission to do so. Please keep in mind that you are not charging what you're worth, and it is not advantageous or virtuous to suffer. And I say this again because I tend to work with heart-centered entrepreneurs who really underestimate the value of their program. Now, I want to dig into some of the questions that I want you to ask yourself in order to price a program so that you can actually meet your own goals, because this is also important. I want you to ask yourself things like, how much money do you need for monthly necessities, bills, food, etc.? And how much money do you want for monthly splurges? So take this all together and figure out how much would you need to make in a year. I also want you to figure out how many hours would you like to work in a day? And what does your ultimate weekly and monthly schedule look like? And please keep in mind the importance of healthy profit margins. This past year, we saw a lot of course creators go out of business because they didn't have healthy profit margins. I've weathered some tough storms as a course creator myself, and having healthy profit margins and making sure I've put away savings in order to be able to cover the costs of expenses is one of the best decisions I have made as a course creator, because I was able to keep the lights on while we were figuring out what was going on with our lead generation and things like that. So now I want you to take some time to outline how you might structure your program, considering the things that I have gone through so far. And I want you to check in with your gut and come up with a price for your program, knowing what you know now. And I want you to think about how this price makes you feel. Keep in mind, oftentimes people create online programs because they're trying to solve a problem better than they could solve it on their own. So think about the problem that you're solving, and if you have solved this for yourself, what would you have paid someone so that you could get to the other side of this heartache or desire? And check in with yourself, because oftentimes when I have calls with students, they're originally pricing their program at like $500. And when I say, okay, but you're solving a problem, what would you have paid to solve this problem and to not have to go through however long it took you to figure out what you needed to figure out to create this program? And generally, that price point is much higher, oftentimes double. Now, I want you to take the price that you have in your mind right now, and I want you to double it and just sit with it for a second and think about how it made you feel. Does it actually feel worth it now that you're thinking about it in this way? Or are you thinking, no, that's way too much? It's okay if you're thinking it's way too much. You might not end up there right away, but generally these are pretty good indicators of where you'll actually fall when you're pricing your course or your program. Now, here are a few other questions I want you to consider, and I'll actually put these questions together in a workbook for you and link them in the description below so that you can actually take the time to go through and journal on all of these. But let's go over them together right now. First, what kind of expenses does your business have, or do you think it will have? Next, what kind of profit margin do you need to not only to be able to pay yourself from your business, but to be able to reinvest in your offer to make it more impactful? Now, this is another thing that people often forget when they are thinking about healthy profit margins. When you are earning good money with your program, you want to take some of that, if not most of it, and invest it back into your program so that you can make it more impactful. This will allow you to charge more. This will grow your reach and your impact. It will also likely increase the amount that you're able to pay yourself. Throughout my business, my online courses have generally had anywhere between a 30 to 60% profit margin. I will be honest with you, when my profit margins were as high as 60%, I actually had moments of feeling a little guilty. But what I did was I knew I was packing that money away for a time that was a little bit rough. And also I took quite a bit of that money and reinvested it back into my program. And I'm so glad I overcame that mindset because it was essential. It was essential through weathering some bad storms. And also it was essential to taking my program to the next level so I could help people more. It allowed me to hire more coaches. It allowed me to build out an editing team. And it allowed me to have more time to create helpful free content like this so that I could support the people who could not afford my programs. Other questions I want you to consider include, what would happen to you if you lost an income source? What would you do if a launch was shy of your income goal? What would you do if an unexpected family emergency came up? And what if a relative or a close friend came to you in need? All of these things are real life considerations and something I want you to take into account as you are working on growing your business. It is so important to continue to invest in things that help your business run smoothly, help elevate the experience for your customers, and help you appear and be more professional. Let's break down some hypotheticals for a second because I don't think people take enough time to consider just how impactful it is to create a digital product that's scalable. Let's say your goal is to earn $100,000 in revenue in 1 year. Here's how that could break down. If you had a $5,000 offer, you would only need to sell it to 20 people in order to hit that goal. If you had a $1,000 offer, you would only need to sell it to 100 people to hit that goal. And if you had a $200 offer, you would need 500 people to hit that goal. This really shows you the power of having a premium product, as well as how incredible it can be to have a digital product, as well as how impactful a digital product can be when you already have an audience. And keep in mind, you want to divide the number of people by 12 because that's how many new students you would need to bring in each month in order to hit your revenue goal. Now, let's talk about what this would look like if you wanted to have $1 million in revenue. If you had a 10K offer, you'd only need 100 people. If you had a 2K offer, you would need 500 people. And if you had a 1K offer, you would need 1,000 people to hit that $1 million mark. I want to take a moment and talk about the first year I had my own program. I sold it for $2,000 to over 500 people and crossed the $1 million in revenue in my first year. 500 people might seem like a lot, but if you divide it by 12, that's only 41 people a month. And that is something that is extremely doable and repeatable when you put most of your marketing on autopilot, which is what we're going to cover in the final video of this series. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, be sure to do that so you can be notified once that's released. So really the takeaway here is notice how you don't need as many people when you have a higher priced product. That's a really important consideration to keep in mind because I want you to take your own financial and time goals into consideration when you are pricing your program. Because at the end of the day, your time is truly your most precious resource because it is a finite resource. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. So keep all of this in mind and really be honest with yourself about the bandwidth that you have in order to deliver the best version of your program possible. Push back on any mindset tendencies that tell you that one-on-one is going to be the best because it really isn't necessarily. And make sure that you are keeping your own financial and time goals in mind because that's really important here. Now, I do want to encourage you to do some market research to see what people are selling programs with, but I will say that it's generally misleading because you're often going to find what's searchable, which is going to be programs that are generally really low priced. And also, you don't really have any way of knowing what's actually inside that program. And this is really the thing that I often see people do is they do market research and it causes them to really lower the price of their program. This is why I actually saved it for the very end of this video because it's not really going to be a good indicator always of what you should price your program at. A few other considerations to keep in mind is if you're going to sell anything at the $3,000 mark or above, you're going to generally need to have a sales call. So if you don't want to have a sales call, I would go ahead and pick something below $3,000. The other thing I would get you to consider is that the higher the price point, the more difficult it is to sell and the lower your conversions tend to be. So just keeping in mind that you might want to start in the $500 range and then slowly raise the price as you gain that proof. It will also help you as you're working with students and you're hearing feedback from them. I had so many people telling me right out the gate, this program is worth way more than $2,000 once they actually went through my program. But obviously somebody who hadn't been in my program would look at the price tag, knowing nothing about it and think, $2,000, are you kidding me? So just keep all of this in mind as you're thinking about where to price your program. You can also check in with your beta testers. If you have people going through a beta test at the end, say, okay, now that you've been through this process and you've achieved the transformation, what would you pay for this? And then the final thing I want to leave you with is it's important to remember that success happens on a compound curve, a compound curve. And at the very beginning of that compound curve, there's what I like to call invisible momentum. So you're working your butt off, you're not really getting a ton of feedback yet, and you are at the beginning of that compound curve, so it feels kind of like you're spinning your wheels. But I am telling you, stick with it because when you hit that tipping point where you actually start to feel the momentum and to receive that feedback, it is a really exciting and powerful time. But that's how success works. It is a process, it's ongoing, it requires refinement, and quite frankly, one of the best things you can do in order to not lose momentum, as I mentioned in this, is to join a community of like-minded people who are working on the same thing you're working on. And with that in mind, I would love to invite you to join Let's Build Your Online Business. I'll link the details in the description below. It is a program and community specifically for people who are building online education programs and is designed to give you everything you need to set you up for success, to help you scale, and to keep you motivated, inspired, and to have support all along the way. So again, details will be linked below, and I hope to see you in there. And of course, if you like this, if this was helpful, please hit that thumbs up button. That's how I know you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.